Welcome to the Open Forum, a program where we look together into the Word of God, trying to make sure that we are understanding it as accurately as possible, because indeed it is so important given the fact that every word in the Bible was written by God, came from the mouth of God in the original languages, and how wonderful it is that night after night we can spend an hour and a half together looking at this verse and that verse, answering questions as to what does this mean or what does that mean. Now tonight we're going to take a little bit of time at the beginning. There's a big question that we might ask. What happens when a group of Christian people calling themselves ambassadors for Christ descend upon a large metropolitan city in another continent altogether and come with the news that Judgment Day is only about 15 months away, and backing it up with the fact that they have written information to prove that indeed this is going to happen. What happens when that city is reputed to be about 95% Roman Catholic? Now that's very important, because the Roman Catholic people have been trained, as we have discovered again and again, to recognize that God is holy. This is something that has to do with God. They recognize, even though they may have never read the Bible, at least they know that the Bible is a holy book. And now here comes 29 individuals. 16 men and 13 women, many of them, I understand, wearing T-shirts that indicate May 21, 2011. That's next year. There's going to be the rapture, the catching up of all the true believers, and it will be the day of judgment. And here they descend on Bogota, Colombia. Bogota is a very big city, 8.6 million people. That's a very large metropolitan city. And we learn that Colombia, of which it is the capital, has about 43 million, of which it's reputed that 95% are Roman Catholic, and almost all are literate. That is, they can read what is being handed out. What really happens in that kind of a situation? Well, that's why we are so fascinated by what is happening as we send these ambassadors for Christ into this kind of a city. And we have a number of reports that have come from them since they arrived there. They descended on that city last week, and now we're getting the reports from how it went. And the first thing that they found was that the weather was very pleasant. Well, that's an incidental matter. When you're on these track trips, it makes no difference whether it's pleasant or not pleasant. You've got a task to do. You have that 150,000 tracks that they are beginning with, together with more than 300 Spanish Bibles, are already available, and they've made the arrangements so that as they go along they can get more tracks printed. And how is it going to develop? And in this case, they are carrying specially two tracks. One, the Judgment Day track, and secondly, the track Does God Love You, which many of us are very familiar with. And Well, the first thing they found as they began the initial distribution is that it was different in this country than it had been in other Spanish-speaking countries. Bogota is a major country in South America. It's the fourth largest, and it is a very large metropolitan area, as I indicated. About 95% of the people, or Spanish is the major language, and all the tracts that were brought were in the Spanish language, and those tracts, incidentally, not only describe what we learn from the Bible about the proofs that Judgment Day is indeed going to come, but they also show or have information on it where they can listen on their radio for whatever family radio programs are available there, as well as on their website so that they can follow up. Now, what happened? Well, the first day they went out, they found that we're normally in a Roman Catholic country of South America, and most of the cities of South America are Roman Catholic. The acceptance rate has been around 90-95%, which is very high. But the first day they went out, they found no, the acceptance rate was more like 50 or 60%. Perhaps the focus on the Judgment Day wasn't quite as interesting as a focus on, does God love you? They also found that when they were in the poorer areas of the city, that the acceptance rate improved considerably. And that's understandable, of course. If you are doing very well in this world, do I really want to hear about Judgment Day? Look, I like this world. Come on, go away. Please go away. And on the other hand, if you are impoverished and life is difficult, maybe Christ is coming and I can go to heaven, and that's way better to think about than being down here where life is so difficult. Well, we have a series of communiques from them, and Bogota, again, is an interesting city because it's about 1.5 miles above sea level at 8,600 feet. It's one of the highest big cities of the world. There are a couple of others in South America also, like Quito, Peru is one of them, and it is a city where they found that it is one of the safe cities, the large metropolitan areas. Now that's a surprise, because as I remember in my memory, and of course my memory may not be very good, but a few years ago I understood that Bogota was not a very safe city to go to, but today it has the reputation of being one of the safest large cities in Latin America. And so the ambassadors, 29 of them, are there working very hard. Now they know what they have to do, and that is go where the people are. And one of the things they found out was that although the acceptance rate remained about average on the first day, full day of distribution, the teams tended to empty their loads of tracts everywhere they worked due to the high volume of people everywhere. Ideal environment in which to pass out tracts. Of course, a team went to the university, the largest university, and there they had opportunity to pass out tracts. One thing they did discover is that there were anti-littering laws, and so nobody threw tracts on the ground, and that may be one of the reasons that they did not take a tract nearly as readily, because maybe they wouldn't like it, and they didn't. They'd have to find a garbage can or a disposal someplace to put it if they did not keep it. But anyway, they also noticed that there were many people reading the tracts once they had been given. One team went to 3 prisons in the area, and they had a very interesting anecdote happen there. They met a very well-dressed attorney who is a long-time family radio listener, and he devoted his whole day in working with the team in all the 3 prisons, each one, so it was a very, very helpful encounter to get into those areas. That is that is something that happens again and again, that something happens that particularly opens a door for people to come in. On another day, they did find that in many areas they went, there was a little improvement. They were beginning to accept a little more than 50 or 60%, and sometimes it was up even as high as 90%. And it depended on the farther away they got from the center of the city, the better the acceptance, and that is because you get down into the city, that's where all the moneyed people are, and that we can understand that they would not have that kind of interest. They had one very interesting experience, and I'm going to read about this in detail. 2 of our ambassadors were in a village outside of the main city, and they sought to get permission to enter into a large farmers market. They were always careful to be very concerned that they didn't try it on toes unnecessarily, that they got permission where they had to get permission, because after all, we are representing the kingdom of God. And they went into the director's office of this particular farmers market, and said that they were told, no, you just can't get permission just like that. But the director did send his assistant to talk with the ambassadors, and initially they were told that permission could not be granted to share this kind of a message. And then, but the person that negotiated from our team of our Spanish ambassador, we read here, diligently negotiated with the assistant who was going back and forth to the director, and then he told them that they would have to pay a fee to distribute them. And, well, yes, all right, we'll pay the fee because it's more important that we distribute than we worry about the last dollar here. And so it was, while it was not customary to do this, they did it anyway. But then, and so they made arrangements to come there a couple of days later. But then, as they left the office, and while the team was about to exit the complex, the assistant came running breathlessly to our Spanish-speaking ambassador, saying, "I have good news for you. It appears that God did soften the director's heart, because he has granted permission, and you can distribute for no charge." My, look how God works. And so this is an example of how God does open doors for the gospel in this country, and it's the kind of thing that does happen from time to time. Well, in another evening, we're going to read some more of these letters, but that's as far as we'll get tonight because we have to have room also for our open forum program. And shall we take our first call tonight, please? Welcome to Open Forum.
Hi, Brother Camping. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Could we look at Hebrews chapter 12, verses 5 to 11?
Hebrews chapter 12, verse 5 to 11. Let's turn to that. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 5 to 11. And ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. If ye endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? But if ye be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then are ye bastards. That's an old English word for ye are illegitimate children. And you are not sons. Furthermore, ye have fathers of our flesh, which corrected us, and we gave them reverence. And shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of spirits, and live? For they verily for a few days chasten us after their own pleasure, but according to what they thought was necessary, in other words. But he for our profit, that is God for our profit, that we might be partakers of his holiness. Now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. Now, what is your question?
Brother Camping, what is the difference between chastening and tribulation? Because I've been going through a lot of stuff since I've been in God's Word with family and friends, and they think that I'm like totally off my rocker and going crazy. And it seems to come very often. So I'm wondering, what's the difference? Am I being chastened or am I going through tribulation?
Well, sometimes we can hardly detect the difference, but the fact is, why does a good parent chasten his child? He does it in order to bring correction. He doesn't ask his youngster to stand in a corner or to do this or do that, which is something the child doesn't like at all, just for the fun of it, or to punish him, but in order to try to get the message through to his child. Look, you're not listening to me. I want you to be obedient to what I am trying to teach you. And that's what God does. He sometimes, we go our own way. And we know that it's not right, and yet we think we have to have that our own way. And then God sends a chastisement into our life. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, when God chastises, it's not something easy or light. It is something that we know, if we're a true child of God, we know why we are chastised. We know that it is an enormous blessing because it helps us to overcome a difficulty that we have been struggling with, whatever it might be. Now, but now the idea of tribulation, we are representative of the kingdom of God. We're in a world that is representing Satan, the kingdom of Satan, and Satan is a bitter foe. And so they are not going to, the people who make up the world, and that's most of them, they are not going to be easy on the people who follow the Lord Jesus. Life is going to be difficult. And even as Christ suffered, as he brought the gospel, he was spit upon, he was reviled, so we will be reviled, and we will be slandered, and we will be treated badly, and that is tribulation. That is different than chastisement.
Okay. I thank you, Brother Camping.
Thank you for calling and sharing. And shall we take our next call, please? Welcome to Open Forum.
Mr. Harold Hampton, if you can pray for me, mental and emotional and psychological and salvation against evil, since the world of flesh and devil. My name is Harry Navelson, California. Keep my safety, needing mental, emotional, psychological, and safety.
All right. Well, thank you for calling. Now, this is not a program designed for bringing prayer requests, but there will be many people praying for you. And shall we go to our next call, please? Welcome to Open Forum.
Brother Camping.
Yes.
I got your book, We Are Almost There, and I just need an explanation on something. You say the Jubilee year is every 50 years. So I was reading the book in the chapter there, the timeline of history, and I saw 1948 was the Jubilee year, correct?
No, 1948 is not a Jubilee year.
What was the last Jubilee year?
Excuse me. In the Old Testament, it began with 1407 and went every 50 years thereupon, 1357, 1307, 1257, and so on. And then going from the Old Testament to the New Testament, it jumped from 7 BC to 44 AD, and then every 50 years, so it would be 94 AD, and then 144 AD, and finally it came to 1994 AD. That is the last Jubilee year, and there won't be another, because the next one, if there were going to be another, would have to be in the year 2044.
Okay. Brother Camping, I have another question to ask you. What do you do, basically, if you're in a marriage that's...
I'm sorry, could you speak up a little bit, please?
Sure. What do you do, like, if you're in a marriage, basically, that God wants you to be together, but yet you're not having any relations with one another, and yet, you know, you're a young man or a young lady, and, you know, you have to fulfill...
First of all, you must remember God knows all about your situation. Okay. About your marriage, and that's a very great comfort. Number 2, God is there for you to cry out to and plead with for help and for wisdom and for showing greater forgiveness and love to your wife. You know, you should read Ephesians chapter 5 again and again and again, as all of us husbands should. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. And it's very easy to fall into a trap where I think I'm the important one, and I don't really think enough about caring for my wife, and so she gets a little bit lonely, and we don't even notice that because we're so busy with our fishing trip or with our other toys that we might have, and when we think about it, when was the last time that I brought some flowers home? When's the last time that I put my arms around my wife and said, "Oh, honey, I love you very, very much"? When is the last time that I did something special for her? And so it begins with me as the husband. I have to make sure that I am doing it God's way, and that requires thinking about my wife a whole lot. And then also being very forgiving and not taking the bait where if she is tired, she's had a bad night, or she has another physical problem of some kind, and so she wakes up cranky and she snaps at me. I don't snap back. I recognize, oh, my dear wife, I'm sorry. And so I try to be as soothing and as possible to my wife. And so first of all, I have to make sure that I am doing what I should be doing. Then on top of it, I can constantly pray, and oh, Lord, may I have wisdom that I will be patient and kind and so it begins with me a whole lot. A lot of times we husbands say, oh, my wife, oh, my wife, oh, my wife. And it's because we are covering up for our misdeeds and not being a husband the way we should be.
Thank you, Brother Camping. God bless you, and you have a good night.
Thank you for calling and sharing. And shall we take our next call, please? Welcome to Open Forum.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, could you go to Genesis chapter 19, verses 30 to 37?
Genesis 19, verse 30.
Could you explain that to me?
Yeah, there we read, and Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountain, and his 2 daughters with him, for he feared to dwell in Zoar, and he dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. And the firstborn said unto the younger, Our father is old, and there's not a man in the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night. And the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he perceived not when she lay down or when she arose. And it came to pass on the morrow that the firstborn said unto the younger, Behold, I lay yesterday with my father. Let us make him drink wine this night also, and go thou in and lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she rose. Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father. Now, first of all, we must remember this has nothing to do with lust. It has nothing to do with bad sexual desire at all. It has to do with an keen desire to preserve mankind. Right before their eyes, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and Zeboam and Admah were destroyed, completely destroyed. It was like it was the end of the world. It was like there's no mankind left. But hold on, I'll be right back with you. We're looking at this interesting passage in Genesis 19, and it's very significant that each of Lot's daughters became with child just with that one encounter with their father. In other words, God was entering into this altogether, because no child is conceived in the womb unless it is God's action that causes this. And these sons did become very important in God's planning, because one became the father of the nation, or the progenitor of the nation of Moab, and the other became the progenitor, the beginning of the nation of Ammon. And we read very much about both of those nations, Moab and Ammon, as we go on in the Bible. But it was done out of a sheer concern. We're the only ones left on planet Earth, and we certainly, how is this human race going to continue? And it was out of that feeling of necessity that this all happened, and it all is part of God's plan. That in that way the Moabites and the Ammonites, who were related, therefore, to Abraham, would also become nations. But shall we take our next call, please? Welcome to Open Forum.
Yes, good evening, Mentor Camping.
Yes.
Yes, I have to clarify something here. I've been getting a couple mixed answers here, but it seems to me the book that you wrote, Adam When, is the most significant for me as far as an answer. When it states, like, such as in Genesis 10:21, we look at Noah was 600 years old at the time of the flood. That was his actual years, isn't it? That isn't a different, that people back in the Old Testament, they weren't it has to be that they were 600 years. Time wasn't read, or time wasn't differently back then, right? He was actually 600 years old.
Well, when God created the universe, He made the sun and the moon. He created this great celestial clock that consists of our sun and the planets that go around it, as well as the planet Earth and the moon. They all are part of that great celestial clock. 4 times and seasons, 4 day and night, and that has never changed. So when the Bible tells us that Adam was 930 years old when he died, he was 930 years old, with each year being 365.2422 days in length. There's been no change in the length of the days. And likewise, when Noah was 600 years old and the flood came, he was 600 years old. And because the time from one year to the next was no different than it is today.
That's what I needed to hear. Thank you so much, Mentor Camping. Thank you.
Thank you for calling and sharing. And shall we take our next call, please? Welcome to Open Forum.
Hi, Brother Camping.
Yes.
I have a question. My daughter and I were speaking, and we were wondering is there anywhere in the Bible that God tells us that we shouldn't eat any kind of certain foods?
No. In the Old Testament, there were ceremonial laws, and one of those were that there were some meats that were considered unclean and should not be eaten, and other meats were clean and could be used for sacrifice and for food. And that is because God used them as a parable, as a historical parable. The unclean meats represented the unsaved of the world who would never become children of God, and the clean meats represented the true believers who would become saved. And but once Christ went to the cross, all those ceremonial laws came to an end. They were all fulfilled in the demonstration of Christ as He demonstrated how He made payment for our sins. And from that time on, we never look at one part of the world as unclean, one part of human nature as unclean, and some people as clean. We simply recognize that all of us need Christ as Savior, and even though there's only a small percentage that do become saved, and we can eat any kind of meat. We read in 1 Timothy chapter 4 that as long as it's received with thanksgiving, whatever, we can eat rattlesnake, or we can eat just anything we wish to eat if we believe that we would like to have that for a meal.
And one more question.
Yes.
The day after May 21st, is God going to give any kind of sign to everyone? How's everyone going to know what's going on?
Well, absolutely, it's going to know. On May 21, there's going to be a huge earthquake, way greater than any that's ever happened before, because every grave, every tomb, every mausoleum is going to be thrown open, and whatever in that mausoleum or that tomb is going to be thrown out. If it is a true believer, the body will come out as a glorified spiritual body and caught up to be with Christ. If it is an unbeliever, it'll be thrown out on the ground. Whatever it is, the corpse or the bones or the dust, whatever is left, will be thrown out on the ground as manure on the ground. The Bible uses that kind of ugly language. And so when May 21 comes around, believe you me, there will not be one human being who will not recognize that it's there, although probably that first day already hundreds of millions of people or maybe millions at least of people will be dead that first day already.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for calling and sharing. And shall we take our next call, please? Welcome to Open Forum.
Hi, Brother Campy. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good. I would like, please, if you would read Proverbs 16, chapter 16, verse 4, and please give me a little explanation on that, and I will take it off the air. And thank you, and have a good evening.
Proverbs 16, verse 4. There we read, Jehovah hath made all things for himself, yea, even the wicked for the day of evil. You see, when we study the Bible, we find that God has designed this world to proceed the way it did proceed, and God already knew before he ever created the world that mankind would rebel against him and would come under his wrath. He already knew everything that was going to happen, but as he conducted himself, as these things did happen, it gave him opportunity to demonstrate not only to the people of this world, but also to other creations that he may have created, other principalities and powers that we don't know anything at all about, the glorious attributes and characteristics and nature of Christ, of how great a God he is, how it gave him opportunity to illustrate his patience, his kindness, his forgiveness, his mercy, his grace, his love, his integrity. Go down the list. Every divine attribute of God that is put on display, and it's all to the glory of God. That's what it's all about. And he finally is the object of all of that, is why this planet Earth exists and why we have what we have as it has developed during these last 13,000 years. But thank you for calling and sharing. And shall we take our next call, please? Welcome to Open Forum.
Yeah, hey, Harold. How you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Hey, do you know what a Definion is?
Do I know what?
A Definion. Definions, like God stands for greatest overall dad.
I still didn't quite understand what you're saying. To say it very slowly, do you know what is?
Definion. A definion is a descriptionary word to help you more identify of what the word in common really is.
I still don't know. Could you spell the word? What is?
Difffion.
Difffion.
That's Definion. Definion is Diffinnnion. Definion.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We're not going to be able to take this call. We're just not making it. I'm sorry. I would like to talk to you, but I just don't know what you're saying.
Oh, hey. Well, what about this? Anyway, read Revelation chapter 21, verse 1.
All right. Now, I understand that. Revelation 21, verse 1. Yes. And there we read, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea.
Yeah, well, we've got part of that already. The world is here. It's not going nowhere this time, and I'm going to rule the whole roost. I'm Rodaddy God, perfectly loved.
You know, I'm sorry. We're not doing well at all. I'm going to have to go to another caller. I'm just sorry. Because I wish I could talk with you. But shall we take our next call, please? Welcome to Open Forum.
Yes, Brother Camping. I have a question. When the rapture comes, will people literally see people being raptured, being caught up in the air? Will they actually see Christ?
They will not see Christ. They will know he has come because of the action that is taking place. It will be just so horrible and so great, and they will see people being caught up to be with Christ. The Bible teaches that others will see them being caught up, and so there will be no question, not the slightest question, but that the day of judgment has come, and those that are left behind will know that they are never going to experience the new heaven and the new earth. They are simply going to die, and that will be their end.
But doesn't the Bible teach that we would see Christ coming on the clouds of glory?
Yes, it does, but when we look at all of the language, it doesn't mean that we will literally see him. For example, let me give you an illustration. In John chapter 1, God uses similar language, and Christ is talking to Nathanael. And he says to Nathanael in John, in John chapter 1, verse 51, he says to Nathanael, verily, verily, truly, truly, in other words, I say unto you, hereafter ye shall see heaven opened, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. And that phrase, hereafter, is the same word that God uses when it talks about hereafter you will see Christ coming. And it is when we see what's now, did Nathanael ever see this literally, that the heaven was open and angels of God ascending and descending upon Jesus? And he answered, yes, but not literally. He saw it. We have to understand this. The fact is, the angels are messengers, and it's not talking about angels, it's talking about messengers of God, which are true believers. And notice, the angels, or the messengers of God, ascending, going up on this Christ, and then coming down on Christ. And how did he see them? Because he actually saw a ladder going up to heaven? No. He saw them in the sense that when he saw someone became a true believer, then we are seated with Christ in the heavenlies, as we read in Ephesians, but then we instantly are dispatched on behalf of Christ to represent Christ in this world. And so this language is not to be understood literally, but it's to be understood that it is describing what God's plan is for the believers. And the same way, when we see the similar language talking about hereafter, using the same words, you will see Christ coming on the clouds of glory. It means that you will see all the evidence that Christ has come. The rapture, or the catching up of the true believers, the horrible day of judgment that is beginning at the very same moment. And then everybody will know Christ has come.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for calling and sharing. And shall we take our next call, please? Welcome to Open Forum.
Yeah, hello, Camping. I have questions about, let me give a statement first, and then I have a question. in the book of Revelation, and there's 24 elders. And who are they? Could they be the prophet, the 12 prophets in the Old Testament, and the New Testament, the 12 disciples?
Yes, the 24 elders, I think, has to be understood that the number 12 was very, very important in the Old Testament. The number 12 is very important in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, remember, there were 12 tribes of Israel, and they represented the kingdom of God during the Old Testament days. And in the New Testament, there were 12, first of all, there were 12 apostles, and they were the beginning of the New Testament church. And we also see, for example, in Revelation 7, where it talks about 12,000 from 12 tribes, all the tribes, and they are referring to the New Testament church. And again, we see the number 12 featured. And so I think we have to understand the 24 elders of Revelation as representing all of the true believers of the Old Testament and the New.
So they're not actually, well, God chosen special to be seated with the...
They were not 24 special people. They were a representation of all the true believers.
All right. Now, one more question. I know you spoke about the 200 billion that will become saved. Now, you mean to say that out of the 7 billion, 600 billion and 800 million will die?
Well, you know, again and again when you read the Bible, you'll find that it talks about the true believers as being a remnant, just a little part of the whole. It's just like if you walk into a shop to buy some material to build some drapes out of whatever, and you only needed a little piece. You're not going to buy a whole bolt of cloth that maybe has 50 yards in it or 100 yards in it. You're looking for just a remnant, just a little piece left over. And that's exactly the way God speaks about the true believers. They're only a remnant. Now, if that is consisting mainly, well, as a matter of fact, every true believer that's ever lived on the face of the earth, except for maybe a half a dozen or so, will be raptured at the same time, will be caught up in their bodies, and in those who are living, it'll be their body and their soul as a whole personality, all simultaneously. And that 200 million represents about 3% of a world of close to 7 billion. And that's that's certainly consistent with the idea of just being a remnant.
So everybody will perish in a way, so 200 million will become saved.
Well, everybody else will not be a child of God, and they don't have their sins paid for, and therefore they have to face the wrath of God, which means that they're going to die. They're going to die. And in the day of judgment, that is the final Holocaust, when all those who have died the previous 13,000 years, they're dead. They're dead, the unsaved. They'll never have conscious existence again. But the world is going on and steaming along. There's more people living in the world than ever before. I was looking at a statistic the other day. Back in 1927, I was 6 years old already then, there were only about 2 billion people in the whole world. Today, there are right close to 7 billion. The world has grown, and it's growing at the rate of about another billion every 10 or 12 years. And so we're coming. It's a big world, but they all have to. The world has to come to an end, and the unsaved have to die, and so it's going to be all occurring in the day of judgment. Anyone who's still alive on May 21, 2011, they will die either that day or within the next 153 days.
I know that that's a very small remnant, that very small portion of us, as far as the population of the world. But could that be the 200 million is the one, the true believers who's really representing the kingdom of God? Besides, God will save. You said there will be nomic numbers. And how do you put that in Revelation?
Well, it depends. It depends on where the context is. You know, the Bible speaks about them as the sand of the seashore. But remember that during the church age, the numbers were kept. If someone asked you how many people belong to the Roman Catholic Church, how many people belong to the Baptist Church, how many people belong to the whatever church, they could give you numbers because they kept lists of baptized, the number that were baptized, the number on the cradle roll, the number on the who were whatever, and so there were numbers. But you have to remember that a great number of people, a high percentage, as a matter of fact, of all who would become saved, are being saved in these days when nobody is keeping any numbers. We don't know where they are, or nobody is can say, well, because they have nothing to do with the church. It's all outside of the churches that this is happening, and for that reason, God speaks about that no man can number them. But God knows. He knows each and every one. He knows exactly their names and where they live and how old they are and everything about them.
Now, my third final question. Now, when we do make it to heaven, what's thereafter? Is God going to create another creation, and will be what?
Well, the new heaven and the new earth is a brand new experience. It has nothing to do with planet Earth. It is God says after He has caught up the true believers that I saw a new heaven and a new earth, and the former is never coming to mind. It will not be remembered at all. It will pass out of existence. Totally. It'll be completely annihilated as if it never did exist. And Satan will have been destroyed. All the fallen angels will have been destroyed. All the unsaved people will have been forever destroyed. And all that, but the true believers, and it looks like it's 200 million, they will begin reigning with Christ. They will be co-heirs with Him of the new heaven and the new earth. And they will be with Him forevermore. That is why it is such a blow to the church people when they find they are left behind, because this is the big target of becoming a child of God. I will be with Christ forevermore in the new heaven and the new earth. And when they find that they're left behind and they're simply going to die, it's going to be a horrible, horrible blow to them, just like it was to the rich man in the parable of the rich man and Lazarus of Luke 16. But thank you.
Thank you so much
for calling and sharing. And shall we take the next call, please? Welcome to Open Forum.
Mr. Camping.
Yes.
How are you tonight?
I'm very well, thank you.
I have a couple of concerns or questions. The first one deals with salvation history. What year do you put? When did the creation actually occur? Your perspective.
When was?
Like 10,000, 12,000 years ago.
Creation, we know, occurred when we coordinated with our modern calendar in the year 11,013 BC. Exactly 13,000 years before the the day that ended the church age. That was exactly 13,000 years after the year of creation. And that was in 1988.
However, I'm also a scientist. I do work with experimental sciences and zoology and so forth. And I came across a passage just the other day which said the limestone formation was formed like 2 million years ago. Now, how do I...
Because they do not read the Bible. And the only proof they have of their accuracy goes back 5,000 years to the invention of writing. And there's no way they have a proof before that. I'll explain that right after this message. You see, the scientist has to work with the evidence that they can find, but they have no way of checking how accurate their final conclusion is. For example, they do a lot of dating with working with radioactive isotopes of, like say, of potassium or of carbon or uranium, and they can calculate with great accuracy what the half-life of a potassium isotope is, for example. And then as they find that in nature, that particular isotope, and examine it with their great diligence, they can make an assumption, a guess, that at some point this was an isotope that had not begun to decay, and now it's down to its 50% of what it was originally, and therefore that will calculate out to be 1,600,000 years or whatever. I'm only being very approximate, and I may not say everything accurately, but it's about this is the kind of thing that it is. They can measure perfectly, but they have to make assumptions. And they have no way of checking how accurate their assumption is, or it's really a guess as to how it began. And then they find a bone that's in a volcano, some volcanic tuff, and they can find some potassium alongside of it, and guess and make their analysis of how old that potassium is, and then they can decide therefore that bone must be that old, and so on. Well, now the fact is, it's all based. The measurements are very accurate, absolutely accurate, but they have to start with an assumption as to how it was right at the beginning, and they have no way of proving that, none. Back to 5,000 years, there is some kind of writing. And if they can find any kind of writing, and early on, the historians of old very frequently wrote about celestial activity like eclipses and so on, and that can be checked against the what is known about the eclipses, and as long as there is a tie in there, they can make a very accurate analysis of something that is up to 5,000 years of age. But once you get past 5,000 years of age, it is impossible to do anything absolutely. You can find other things that seem to agree, but it's all based on assumption. The only accurate record that we have is the Bible. The Bible. And there's nothing in the Bible that disagrees with the evidence that is found in nature. There is nothing that disagrees. It's only that it disagrees with the assumptions or the guesses that the scientists must make. And you know, when they write in the National Geographic magazine or Science or any of these prestigious places, they write like, well, there's no question at all. This monkey or this fossil was an animal that lived 83 million years ago. And we read that and we say, well, he's a brilliant scientist. He must know what he's talking about. He doesn't know at all what he's talking about. He doesn't tell you about the guessing that went into the calculation. And the moment you guess, you don't have any truth anymore. That's what's so wonderful about the Bible. We never guess. We never guess. We read it, and if it isn't in the Bible, and we it is completely harmonious with what we find in the Bible, then we know we don't have truth. But thank you for calling and sharing. And shall we take our next call, please? Welcome to Open Forum.
Good evening, Mr. Camping.
Yeah.
I got a gang box of questions for you, but I'll only hit you with a couple tonight. Part of your last answer to that gentleman answered part of my question. It's about the church age. You say that from the beginning of creation to the end of the church age is 13,000 years.
Isn't that interesting? And you know, when I learned that many years ago, I thought, now, isn't this something? 1988 is the 13,000th anniversary of the history of the world. And who knows it? Well, I know it, but at that time nobody else did that I know about. But now, of course, many, many people know that. But and isn't that interesting? Exactly, to the very year, not approximately, or it was to the very year, 13,000. And God, as He developed the timeline of history, again and again, we found these kind of facts that it would be right to the very day or to the very year, because everything was all done with very, very great care by God, just like when the scientists send a rocket to the moon or to Mars. How are they able to do that? Because the laws that God has established to govern these kind of events are very, very accurate and dependable, always very accurate and dependable, and otherwise they could never do that. And so when God gives us numbers in the Bible, they're very accurate and dependable, and we see how frequently they tie in in such a very exciting and interesting way.
Mr. Camping, how did you come to that conclusion? Is that off the Jubilee years, or?
Oh no, it's a long study. If you get a copy of the Biblical Calendar of History, that shows how that was developed through just looking at the language of the Bible. If you read the Bible, you'll notice that it has all kinds of numbers in the Bible. Some of those numbers don't help us at all in developing the timeline of history. Others are very important. And as we get better and better acquainted with the Bible, we learn which numbers are important, and we learn how to tie them together, always following biblical rules, never guessing or fudging. That's worth nothing. And we find that God had a purpose when He said Noah was 600 years old when the flood came. God had a purpose when He said that Abraham was 75 years old when he came into the land of Israel, in the land of Canaan, and so on. And we learn these things and are able finally to fit them together like a jigsaw puzzle. We find that this piece finally fits right there, and it harmonizes beautifully with what we had before. And then when we get all done, we sit back and we say, well, now, isn't that interesting? 13,000 years to the very year. That was not one of the means by which we arrived at 1988. It was simply a beautiful piece of information that was derived when we finally arrived at 1988 as the end of the church age and 11,013 BC as the date of creation. Just like when we finished learning that 2011 would be the year of the end of the world, and 4990 was the year of the flood. And then after that was done, we found that they were exactly 7,000 years apart. Oh, wonderful.
Big proof. That was my next question. It's something else, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
It's something else. You're doing a heck of a job down up there. You keep up the good work, because we need you right to the end.
Well, thank you for calling and sharing.
Have a good night.
And thank you. And shall we take our next call, please? Welcome to Open Forum.
Good evening, Mr. Camping. First of all, getting back to the scientists, they have a term for that guessing. It's called junk science.
Well, okay. I was not familiar with that. But I do know that I do know why, and that is these scientists are very intelligent men and women, and they know there is a God. It's because man was created in the image of God, and that's intuitively in the heart of every human being. But that is completely unacceptable to them, because they also know that they are sinners, and that someday they have to answer to God, and there's going to be a consequence, and they don't want to face that, and so they work overtime coming up with these ludicrous ideas of long periods of time and creatures adapting themselves and finally coming into existence. Oh my! It is incredible. It's incredible that intelligent people can think that way, but they have to, because if they don't, they have to admit there's a God, and then what?
Yeah, I think it leads to man's arrogance too. But the question I had for you, Harold, was I have searched my concordance and I have searched the Bible, and nowhere in there can I find the word rapture. So how is it you come to keep using this word?
Well, you'll hear me very frequently say, it'll be the time the believers will be caught up, and that is what's in view. The reason I use the word rapture is because all theologians have used that word in connection with the catching up. They speak of the rapture. You are absolutely correct. It is not a biblical word. It is a theological word. It means to be caught up, to be.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Camping. And as the previous caller said, keep up the great work. I've certainly learned a great deal from you in the past 3 decades and from Family Radio. Thank you for that.
Thank you for calling and sharing. And shall we take our next call, please? Welcome to Open Forum.
Good evening, Mr. Camping. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
I had a question, sir. With the next year of the Judgment Day coming, why is there no priests or ministers or even the Pope, for that matter, anybody else giving the world warning?
Well, I don't know, but I do know this, because I have, the first 70 years of my life, I was right in the heartbeat of the churches, and I learned very much how churches operate. And the problem is that they do not read the whole Bible. Every church has what they call a creed or a confession or a catechism, the basic truths or what they believe is basic truth that they teach. And most of the time it's something that was developed 100 years or more ago, in some cases all the way back 1,800 years ago or thereabouts. But the fact is, they have that well in hand, and this is what they teach in their seminaries. Their preachers come out of seminary thoroughly schooled in these creeds, but they're one thing they didn't learn was that every word in the Bible, in its original language, was from the mouth of God and is super important. They did not learn that they should be continuing and continuing and continuing to study the Bible for anything more that God might reveal. And so there's all kinds of things they have never really looked at seriously, or at a time when God was opening that information, as He is in our day, right near the end. And so those of us who have been very let me put it this way, have not been locked in to the creeds of a church, have not been locked into this confession or that confession that this is what we are to believe, but have been locked in. The one thing we want to believe is the Bible, and so we're going to keep looking at the Bible and keep looking at the Bible, looking for truth, and lo and behold, we begin to discover some things that we never knew before, and then some more things, and some more things. And then we learn that we're living at a time when God is, for the first time, is revealing many of these things to anyone who seriously is studying the Bible. But the people in the churches, their preachers all come out of seminary, and they have never learned that. So to them, it's all a bunch of heresy that we're teaching. They absolutely cannot go along with it because they don't know anything about it. They have never done any homework in the Bible concerning these things. And I'll tell you, it takes a lot of homework, a lot of careful studying to begin to find these things in the Bible.
So do I take it to understand that you're saying that any other man of the cloth in this world doesn't understand the Bible as you do? Is that what you're saying? Or?
Well, I have to be so careful because I could sound egotistical or proud, and frankly, that's the last thing I want to be. But I don't know. I remember, I can just tell you an experience. I remember 40 years ago, or 45 years ago, I was 35. That would be 53 years ago. I made a decision to really start studying the Bible, and because I was a civil engineer, I was intently interested in all the numbers of the Bible. And for 5 years, every time I had a few minutes, I would be looking at the Bible. If I was waiting for to go somewhere with my wife and I was sitting in the car waiting for her, I would open my Bible and read. Or any time I could find, I looked and I puzzled and puzzled. Why did God give us these numbers? They must have a meaning. They're all in the Bible, and I have no idea what they are. And of course, I was praying for information or praying for wisdom because I didn't know anything. I didn't trust my mind at all. But lo and behold, it took about 5 years. I had been able to learn enough about some key numbers of the Bible so that I was able to arrive at creation beginning in the year 11,013 BC. Now, this was over 40 years ago, and at the time I knew I had done my homework accurately because I checked it in different ways, and it all fit together without fudging any of the biblical language at all. And yet I remember the funny feeling I had. It was a real strange feeling. I thought, now what in the world's going on? I'm a nothing. I'm not a theologian. I'm a civil engineer. And yet somehow I believe God has revealed a very important truth to me. No one else has ever been able to figure out the year of creation. Why me? And it was a very strange feeling. Then I wrote a book immediately after that called Adam When, and in that I also looked at all of the scientific detail that I could. I checked out every way I could. Is there anything in the secular world that would contradict this conclusion? And I checked out radioactive dating. I checked many things. The amount of sediment in the oceans, and all I found was everything. There was nothing that upset the date at all. So I published the book, and it still is available free of charge to anyone. But why me? Why me? Now I do know that God uses the nothings of the world to get His work done. You know, when He chose His 12 disciples, He didn't start with the Apostle Paul. He started with fishermen, ignorant fishermen, Peter, James, and John. And that's the way God works. He chooses the nothings of the world to confound the mighty. And I suppose that's what happened here. And slowly, and of course, then others began to, as we talked about this on the open forum, I learned from others. They made an addition here or a comment there that served to add, and so my knowledge would increase very, very greatly.
I have one final question, and I'll take that on the air, and I appreciate you taking my call. Does the Bible not teach us no man, keyword, no man shall know the day or the hour? And as I said, I'll take it on the air, and I appreciate you taking my call.
Yeah, that is given to the church age. Read Acts chapter 1, and there you find that God told the disciples who were the beginning of the New Testament church, of the times and seasons you will not know. In fact, let me read that now so that I'll say it correctly. He says in Acts chapter 1, he says in verse 7, it is not for you to know the times or the seasons which the Father hath put in His own power, but ye shall receive power after that the Holy Spirit is come upon you, and ye shall be witnesses unto me, both in Jerusalem and in all Judea and in Samaria, and unto the uttermost part of the earth. Now that was the task of the church age, to get the gospel into the whole world. And God here is declaring that during that church age, nobody better get preoccupied about the question of when it all began or when it's going to end. It's not for you to get involved in that. You get busy and bring the gospel. But when we go on in the Bible, we find that near the end, God made a commitment that the true believer would know times and judgment. And he speaks about this, for example, in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, where if we watch and watch, that finally God would open our eyes, because we have another task here. We have the same task that Noah had, the same task that Jonah had when he was sent to the Ninevites, and that is to tell the world when the end is. That is the mercy of God, absolute mercy and love of God, that He doesn't spring this on the world, that May 21, 2011 will be the day of judgment. He tells the people ahead of time so they can cry out to God for mercy. Oh, Lord, then, oh, my. Is it possible that I still can become saved? Oh, Lord, help me to turn away from my sins. Oh, Lord, have mercy, have mercy, have mercy. And as a matter of fact, God does tell us very clearly that it's during this time, this very time, He is saving a great many people. In one place in Hosea, He speaks of it as they will be as the sand of the sea. In Revelation chapter 7, He speaks of it as a large crowd or a great number. And that will become saved. And so he is doing a wonderful work of salvation in this day, which will impact just a remnant, maybe 3% of the world's population. But nevertheless, it is all part of the wonderful, wonderful fact that we know when that end will be, so we don't have to be caught by surprise. And God has given us enough time. We still have 15 months to go, so that we're Family Radio itself is able now to publish this information in 51 different languages. Wow. By radio, so that there's no part of the human race that is not in some way able to hear about this. In addition, the news media from time to time pick it up, and they maybe will increasingly do that. And so by the time we get to May 21, I believe, this will be very, very, very well-known fact to every inhabitant of planet Earth. But now shall we take our next call, please? Welcome to Open Forum. Or do we have time for another call? Yes, a very quick call. Do we have another caller?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Camping.
Yes.
It's a three-part question. I'm just curious, do you have any plans to liquidate your personal assets, knowing that you won't need them at, let's say, May 13th?
Excuse me.
And also,
Excuse me. Now think about that. Why do I have to worry about my personal assets or anything else? The Bible tells me, and every true believer, occupy until I come. And so I will be working just on the May 21, just as I'm working today, with my full attention on how can we tell more people. And why should I get busy with these mundane things? Those personal assets, they'll all be taken care of by God. I'll tell you, on the day of judgment, the whole world is going to be destroyed. And so that's not the issue. The issue is, am I being faithful? And every true believer has to ask that question. Am I being faithful? Or each one has to ask himself that question of himself. Am I being faithful in an intense desire to share this with others? And am I praying for my children, or my father or mother, or my friends or my cousins who at this point have no interest at all in knowing about this, and yet maybe God might still be merciful upon them. That's where the activity has to really be placed. But thank you, and we've come to the end of our program. Until our next program, may the Lord richly bless you.